Hey, Harvest family. These COVID days have been so disruptive and trying, I know. Thankfully, we've been able to continue gathering together for worship, albeit not quite in the exact same ways as previously, either in person because of masks and seating limitations, or the whole online experience. Worship isn't quite what we'd want it to be, but given what it could be, we are thankful for what we have. All throughout this unusual season, our desire as your elders has been to help us as a church family keep the main thing the main thing. How can we foster our own and our people's love for God and love for one another? Can we keep our eyes on Jesus in the midst of these most unusual of seasons? Even with the difficulties and disruptions of these days, there are things that haven't and don't change. As Christ followers, we are still called to love God and love other people, even if the means of doing so looks different than it has in the past. We are still dependent upon and humbled by the grace of God to us in Jesus Christ, even as we're having to see new applications of that grace. As leaders of this church, we want any and all who desire to worship in person with us to be able to do so with a reasonable expectation of safety. We're attempting to lead us through the tensions created by, on the one hand, a desire to welcome visitors and have as many people as possible present with us in worship, and a desire, on the other hand, really a commitment to maintain appropriate and responsible health practices during all of our worship services. So as part of our ongoing response to these dynamic COVID days, the elders of the church have recently decided to make a few changes to our worship services. I announced these yesterday in corporate worship, but for those of you that weren't able to be with us, I'll run through them here briefly. The following changes take effect this Sunday, December 6th. First, we're changing our service times from 8 and 10 to 9 and 10:45. Historically, 10 a.m. is our summer worship time, and then we rotate back to a 10:45 worship hour in September when Sunday school starts back, usually at 9:30. However, this year, being what it was, we didn't make that change in September. We just stayed with the 10 o'clock worship service time in addition to the 8 o'clock earlier service. But at the point that we were considering making other changes to our worship services, and with a desire to make the first service a bit more, doable time-wise for some, we decided to make the service time change as well. So, services beginning this Sunday will be at 9 a.m. and at 10:45 a.m. Note here that the worship service will continue being live streamed to our Facebook page, just now beginning at 9 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. The second change is that the first service will have increased social distancing. While the ropes will remain at every other row for the second service, during the early service, seating will be limited to every third row. Thus far, the early service has been reserved for folks that are higher risk. So if you're considering attending that early service, which you're certainly welcome to do, just please be mindful of the fact that others that are attending that service are likely interested in maintaining an increased amount of social distance. So the adjusted seating arrangement in the sanctuary for the first service is meant to reflect and support that desire. So every third row in the first service and every other row in the second service. Third change, in order to better utilize the fellowship hall as service overflow, the nurseries and the classrooms down the hall that have been closed up to this point will be open to serve as additional family/cry rooms. So please note that these rooms will not be staffed and that parents must be with their children while they're in those rooms. As well, appropriate masking and social distancing practices should be observed here as much as possible. Utilizing the nurseries and the classrooms as additional family/cry rooms should enable folks seated in the fellowship hall to remain more engaged in the worship service. Fourth thing I'd note for you, and this is really just for situational awareness, is the deacons will be reserving a socially distanced pew at the back of the sanctuary in which they can safely seat latecomers. So that's just for your awareness as you come into the sanctuary. The back couple rows will probably be roped off, but the deacons are aware of that and reserving one of those pews for latecomers so that they can maintain safe social distance even if we fill up in other areas. The last thing I'd note for you is one thing that is not changing, and that is our masking policy. We ask that you wear a mask in the building. When you're seated in your pew, you can remove your mask if you wish. Thank you, church family, for your patience with us as we work through these matters. Thank you for your sensitivity to the needs of others. And thank you for your commitment to the corporate worship of God. This has not been an easy season by any stretch of the imagination, but we will make it through together by the grace of God. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me or one of the other elders. You can send me an email or even post a comment with your question. Beloved, grace and peace are yours and will continue to be yours in Jesus.